What's up, fellas? The KP show. We are headed into week 9 to face the Dolphins here. Before we get into that, I don't really want to touch too much on this game. Obviously, it feels like forever ago since they played, it's being a week ago now. Chargers lost 35-21. Chargers got outplayed. I mean, we know this story that we know that the refs, made some terrible calls, but at the same time, the Chargers just didn't play well enough to win. So without going too much into, quarter by quarter, player by player, I just want to touch on some quick takeaways that I had from the game. First and foremost, I thought that for the first time, I feel like the defense coordinator, John Pagano, really called a good game. And I know that your first thought would be, like, what? Denver scored 35 points. They had 6.5 yards per play. They were 8 of 13 on third downs. The defense only had one quarterback hit. And while that's all true, I think it's less about the result and more about the process. I thought that Pagano did a great job of disguising coverages and blitzes. Early on in the game, he had Peyton Manning confused, it seemed like. Manning was he really wasn't in rhythm, just like we're used to seeing him, 1, 2, 3 throw. I thought the late rotations in the secondary, there were some well-timed overload blitzes that really helped him move Manning off his spot. Basically everything that I've been complaining about, Pagano did this game, and the first 4 drives of the game, Denver was only held to 1 touchdown. So you really can't ask for much more than that. Players were where they were supposed to be for the most part, in position to make the plays. They just didn't make them. So I really, like, for the first time, it's so weird saying this after everything I've ever said about Pagano, but I felt like he did a good job. I mean, there were 10 missed tackles. There were 40 yards after contact. So, I mean, there's no way you can really account for that. And I just think that, we know that Denver is the type of team that's going to make their fair share of plays. And Pagano went down swinging aggressively, and that was, I felt it was refreshing to watch. Obviously, Richard Marshall isn't going to be there anymore, so you don't have to worry about him. So I guess that kind of segues into my other takeaway, just that the secondary was kind of exposed for what they were. Richard Marshall was toast. He got released this last Tuesday, so no more pass interferences from him, no more missed tackles, no more getting burnt for long touchdowns. I mean, he just looked like he had no place on an NFL roster. It's too bad that Jason Verrett got hurt, because even though he gave up a long pass, but he was right there. He literally just mistimed his jump and was going to bat it away. There was another catch he gave up where it was on the goal line. He slipped out of his break. If he didn't slip out of that, he has a chance to break up the pass. And then the touchdown, he's in man coverage and he has to chase the corner all the way across the field. I think it was about 30 yards across the field. And that was what Jalil Adai, who, I mean, I'm sure we all know that he was concussed, the whole stinger thing, how the Chargers didn't handle that very well. But as far as on the field strictly, I thought Adai this game, for the first time this year, I feel like he really got caught staring in the backfield too often. I mean, Peyton really manipulated him with his eyes, and Adai was just out of position more often than usual. And he's actually been pretty good at free safety. So hopefully he can get healthy, and hopefully, we see the Adai of the regular season and not, the Adai of this last week. And getting Brandon Flowers back is going to be huge, because that is going to limit Marcus Gilchrist from guarding wide receivers in the slot. He had a little bit of trouble in that this last game here. He had 3 blown coverages, and then he had that BS penalty. And then Weddle was Weddle, but just as a whole, I thought the secondary was exposed for what they were. Sharice Wright had a nightmare of a game, probably the worst game that I've ever watched of him. He was targeted 12 times. He gave up 7 completions. And I could see if it was, 7 completions, he was right there, made the tackle. But all of those were blown coverages. and he also surrendered 5 first downs and a touchdown. And there's a vine that I put up on him that he basically looked like he got crossed over on a basketball court. He got shook out of his shoes and he fell for it was a deep in route. So the secondary is really they're gonna have to get healthy, man. That's really all you can ask for. There's guys that are playing that shouldn't be playing right now, or there's guys that are in position. There's guys that are guarding receivers that they really shouldn't have to. Ideally, I mean, I can imagine that Sharice Wright will probably be on. If he is on Demarius the next time they play, the difference this time would be you're shading your safety help towards him, leaving Verrett on an island compared to the opposite with Richard Marshall. So that will go a long way, and Sharice Wright will be able to sit on more routes. The other takeaway that I had was Chris Watt, man. Chris Watt, I think it's about time. I actually think we saw it, too, that, just let him start. What's the holdup here? Last game, he actually outplayed Johnny Troutman for the first time all season. Watt played 40 snaps. Troutman played 22. What else? Oh yeah, I mean it's just becoming clear that Watt's outplaying him. He's playing at a higher level. He's getting more movement in the run game, and he's flawless in pass protection. He doesn't have the same issues that Troutman does in the passing game. And in the run game, he's able to move laterally, without falling down. That's something Troutman really struggles with. Watt and Fluker are really a good pair. And actually, Patrick Green, one of our writers, had a really good point on how the guard rotation is affecting Fluker. How could Fluker possibly get in a groove where every 5 to 6 plays there's a new guard lined up right next to him? I think Fluker's struggles have been blown out of proportion, in my opinion. Like, you see, the hot takes during the game where a player gives up one big play, all of a sudden he's had a terrible game. We saw that last week where he just got, embarrassed off the edge by Von Miller, who I think is the best edge rusher in the game. And, he got beat 3 times all game. He got beat 3 times by Von Miller, which is not a bad game by any means. So I just wonder, and all 3 of those times he was beat, Troutman was in the game. So I wouldn't say that's totally a coincidence. Watt really does make the players around him better, and I don't think Johnny Troutman does that. So I think Watt will help Fluker out, and he'll also help Ornberger out, who had a really, really rough game as well last game. I had Ornberger down for 7 missed blocks, and just what he's asked to do is he's just not fit. He's just not fit to do that athletically. So I guess the last takeaway was it seems like Frank Wright he's having a hard time of figuring out what Brandon Oliver does well, like what running plays would work best for him, and I think that's sort of affecting the offense as a whole. So can't figure out, what plays work for Oliver. So that kind of carries over to 2nd and 3rd and longs, and he's having to dial up these deep passing combinations. So I think that's where getting Ryan Matthews back would be huge, because he knows what Matthews can do. He knows he doesn't have to, tinker with the run game. He doesn't have to. He's literally like in the bag looking for any kind of run combination that he can possibly think of, and his creativity is nice. He's really running out of a bunch of different formations, but it's just that they can't find their bread and butter, like their 3 to 5 runs that really work. And Matthews has those runs, so that'll be good moving forward. Hopefully Matthews gets healthy, and Oliver will still get his touches. One thing that stood out in the Denver game was Oliver had 20 touches, and 10 of those went for 1 yard or less. And I think there's no way in hell that happens with a guy like Ryan Matthews' talent. So just need to get healthy all along the line. I wrote about that today, or I guess as you're listening to this, it would be on Wednesday. So they just need to get their guys back. I mean, no excuses because they've been outplayed. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm making excuses. But that I guess that's enough. No, we know they lost. Moving on to the Dolphins. So I'm actually joined by one of my good friends, Ian Wharton. He covers the Dolphins. Ian, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, Kyle? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, no doubt. Ian, tell the people what it is that you do and where we can find your work at.
Right now, I'm covering the Dolphins for Bleacher Report, also NFL draft work for Optimum Scouting, and a little bit of side work at FinDepth. It's a little bit of a startup project that we've started just to kind of look at the game a little bit differently, and definitely get in contact with me on Twitter at NFL Film Study. Best place. I'm always tweeting with people, so it doesn't even have to be Dolphins, can be whatever. Always checking out all the games each week. So
Yeah, and for those of you guys that are listening here, Ian put out some really good screenshots today of just like the Dolphins. So just go to his timeline on Twitter, and he has some screenshots of just Dolphins, just Dolphins related stuff. So you see guys getting blocked, you see guys beating blocks, you see just from the all 22 you get a better view of it. So it's really good stuff. So if you haven't had a chance to really watch the Dolphins this year, he sort of gives you a good look that doesn't take, you don't have to sit down and watch the game for 2 hours or whatever it is. So, yeah, Ian, usually I wanted to start off with how the rookies are doing. So you cover the draft. So how did you feel first about the Dolphins' first round pick?
I was excited about it. I like Juwan James. I had a second round grade on him. We ended up taking him at 19. And you kind of feel the way you feel about that is where you kind of reach for the talent for that immediate need. There's always a little bit of a worry because they passed up some guys like Brandon Cooks, even some other offensive tackles that were on the board, or Joel Bitonio, who ended up going in the early second round, guy that you could have used at another spot in the line. And you're saying, well, did they take the best talent there at 19? Or could they have traded down and still gotten that talent? And so I think that's where most of the concern was. But from a talent perspective, I was glad that they got James. He's been a right tackle for his entire career. Very durable player, good pass blocker, really fit what the Dolphins needed for 2014. And surprisingly, he's been better than expected. I think even best case scenario is what I would call him so far. I would arguably say he's been the best rookie offensive tackle this season. Sean Henderson for the Bills has kind of been up and down. He would be the other competitor for that title, in my opinion. But James he's been pretty solid. He's been surprisingly good as a run blocker, which was a little bit of a concern that I had coming out. But James has definitely been a plug-and-play type starter with upside to possibly move to left tackle in the future.
Yeah, no, I think that I don't disagree at all that he's probably been the best, that there has been. I do wonder, like you said, if they've been able to get if they were going to get James here if they moved down. But I mean, you just take the best player on your board. You take what you need. So I don't think there's any problem with taking a tackle, whether it's left tackle or right tackle in the first round, because you have to build from the inside out, and that's how you get better. And we all know how the Miami line was last year, so I guess it makes perfect sense. And it doesn't seem like he's been a liability. And as a rookie tackle, you can't really ask for much more than that. So the second round pick, Jarvis Landry. Everybody loved Jarvis Landry. He didn't run very fast. I mean, but really, who cares? He's a receiver that, I mean, not every receiver. I feel like in the draft, people feel like if you don't run a 4.4, you're not going to be a competent receiver in the NFL, and that's just so far from the truth. But I was a big fan of Jarvis Landry. I had him ranked pretty much right around where he's drafted. How do you feel like he's been in addition to the offense this year?
He's been exactly what they needed, and it was interesting at the time because they had traded back, I believe, with Green Bay in the second round. They had a chance to take Devontae Adams, It was either San Fran or Green Bay they traded down with, and Green Bay ended up a few picks later, I think, taking Devontae Adams, and those were two guys I was really high on, especially Adams. I had him as a top 15 overall player. So for them to trade down and take Landry, I was like you, I think he was right around that 50 to 65 range. He's really been a great fit for the offense. He's primarily a slot receiver, very rarely lining up outside, which is a little bit surprising, but he's got that toughness, he's got the hands, he's got the open field ability to make guys miss. He's not that physical specimen, but like you said, you put him out on the field, and the guy's going to play football, and the guy's he's going to do what he does best, and that's create. Very, very reliable player since the first couple weeks. He had a couple drops in the first 2 weeks. You could tell it was a little bit of nerves. But as soon as week 3 and 4 against Kansas City and then Oakland, you really saw him just kind of relax, settle into the offense. And his toughness and reliability is something that's really crucial, and I think that the Dolphins may have gotten themselves a player that's going to be on the roster and be a good contributor for the next, I don't know, 7 to 10 years. Obviously, is the hope. Injuries, unless if injuries happen, because skill set wise, he's not reliant on his physical talents. He is what he is, and there's a lot of positives with that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, you just want a guy that can catch the ball consistently in traffic, and that's exactly what Landry is. And he doesn't have to have, the kind of separation that other receivers have because he's so tough like that. But is there any other young guys that have been contributing for you guys?
There's some young guys. I wouldn't say rookies. Billy Turner's been out with an injury. He was the 3rd round pick. Day 3 for the Dolphins was really a high upside type draft. They got a couple small school guys, Walt Aikens. They moved him to safety. He's got an interception on the year, but he's been mostly a special teams contributor. A couple injuries with Arthur Lynch and Jordan Tripp. Those guys haven't been able to play. Matt Hazel's on the practice squad, and then Terrence Feedy, who they took out of Marist in the 7th round over Michael Sam, created some controversy at the time, but he's actually been a really solid role player. He's gotten about 10 snaps a game or so, but he's one of those guys that when you look at him in a football perspective, you're drooling over him. Just an amazing physique, amazing physical talent, 6'4", 278, and he's been able to translate to the NFL, I think, a little bit better than what I had anticipated for a kid from Marist. But I think the guy that they really they took a flyer on that really could be something special is Chris McCain. He was kicked off of the University of Cal's team last year, and no one really talked about him. I mean, I don't even know. I never remember hearing this guy's name at Cal. But he's an edge player, so he's going to blitz a lot from defensive end, occasionally at outside linebacker. He's a fluid athlete, not in the role of like Von Miller, but he's one of those guys that when you're going to look back in the draft, he can be a guy that you should have said, well, he should have been drafted. The character concerns obviously probably pushed him down, but the Dolphins have had a productive draft so far, but it hasn't reached its potential just because a lot of these guys were picked for 2015 as opposed to 2014.
Yeah, no, I actually watched Fidei quite a bit in the draft process. So he was one of the guys that I was hoping the Chargers would take a flyer on because, I mean, you just can't – you never have enough, defensive line type bodies, and he just looks like such a good athlete. So let's kind of segue into the Dolphins offense. Tannehill, gets a lot of scrutiny. He's usually a hot topic. How do you feel like he's performed this year?
He's been consistently inconsistent, and he's a webs and flows kind of player. He's very rhythmic, and you could argue that for a lot of quarterbacks, but he's especially so. So he's in the realm of quarterbacks 12 to 20 in the league, and it just kind of depends on which game it is, and even which half it is. He's been a lot more consistent since the Oakland game. Before the Oakland game, the team went over to London. Joe Philbin left the door open on whether they were going to bench Tannehill or not. And ever since then, Tannehill seemed very determined. He seems like he's playing with a chip on his shoulder, and it's very interesting. He's much more decisive, but it's more on a half basis. So the team struggles to start quickly. I think a lot of that's coaching. They've got a first-year offensive coordinator with Bill Lazor, and it's taken some time for the offense to kind of gel. Receivers are often running wrong depths on routes, wrong places, and it really kind of hurt the offense for the first 3 weeks. And then the Oakland game, they started to get it a little bit, and then the next couple weeks against Green Bay and Chicago, you saw a half of brilliance where the running game was working perfectly. It's a zone blocking system, so when that starts to get going, the Dolphins are really dangerous because everything plays off of that. So when they're not running the ball well, it puts a lot of pressure on Tannehill. And his receivers haven't really been exactly reliable this year. Mike Wallace has played a lot better than 2013, much more of an intermediate option. And Tannehill has pretty good chemistry with him up until about 20 yards. After about a 20-yard throw, Tannehill he often doesn't throw an accurate deep ball. He had a 50-yarder last week, which was something good to see, but he also missed 2 deep balls as well. So Tannehill's a guy, he's a short to intermediate thrower. He really needs to be on the move. When he's on the move, when he can roll out of the pocket, and when he's done a better job of extending plays this season, breaking out of sacks, rolling out of the pocket. When he does that, he's excellent. And it's really a place for growth that we've seen this year from him. There's a play specifically that he does against Green Bay, pressure right up the middle, sheds the tackle, rolls out to the right, delivers just a perfect 20-yard strike. I think it was to Mike Wallace, and you see the tools there. You see all of the raw abilities. He's flashing them for a half at a time. He's a guy that has to now put that together for 3 quarters at a time. I don't think he'll ever be an elite quarterback where you're talking top 5 to 6. It's probably just not realistic. The question on Tannehill is, can he be a guy like Flacco, where Flacco got hot for that playoff run and then led his team to a title? Can he sustain that high level of play for games at a time as opposed to halves at a time? I don't think he's far off, in all honesty. I think it's coming together. He just doesn't have a ton of help right now around him, and he's a somewhat limited quarterback. Like I said, he's not elite, so you have to get him that help. He's not going to make a guy like Brian Hartline all of a sudden. I mean, he made him a 1,000-yard receiver, but in this new offense, a guy like Hartline just isn't getting open. He doesn't run those deep of routes quick enough to be open in about 3.5 seconds. So it's been an interesting fit with the offense, the personnel, and Tannehill. I think the offense fits Tannehill fairly well. I just don't know if his weapons really fit the offense quite as well.
Sounds like a very honest observation of Tannehill. I mean, every time I watch, I see the missed throws. I see that he's been sacked 17 times. How much would you say of that is on him, and how much would you say is on the offensive line?
I would probably count the sacks that I would attribute to Tannehill. I'd say less than half. A big problem has been the interior line play. They signed Darren College he formerly was with Green Bay, which there he had a connection with Joe Philbin, and College. And then before Mike Pouncey got back, it was Dallas Thomas, Shelley Smith. It's just been kind of a revolving door with that interior line, and even Samson Sattel at center. You know, guys like Sattel and College, those guys were out of the NFL, and there's a reason why. I think that they've done a decent job coming in off the street, starting for the Dolphins, but they've seen a ton of pressure from the interior. Just guys losing as soon as the ball is snapped. I mean, if you guys check out my timeline from Wednesday, you'll see Sean Derek Marks just putting a clinic on Darren College, and that's happening on a weekly basis. The tackles have been better, a lot better over last year. and Tannehill's been a little bit quicker, especially like I said, that Oakland game, something seemed to click. He's getting the ball out quicker. He's anticipating a little bit better. Still not to where you want it to be, but you're definitely seeing signs of that growth. I still think the interior offensive line is a problem right now for the Dolphins, and that's kind of where they're getting stuck in mud in that, especially in the first half.
Yeah, no, in limited watching that I've had, left guard is definitely an area to attack of the Dolphins, and that just so happens to be where one of the Chargers' best defenders, Corey Liuget, lines up at. So there's really no reason he shouldn't have a big game. I would imagine that it'll be sort of a push up the middle with Pouncey, Sean Lissamore, who doesn't really get much pub, but he's a good player. He does his job. The left end, Kendall Reyes, he hasn't been playing as bad as many make him out to be, but it's not like he's been blowing it up either. He's better than last year, but he still doesn't play with the kind of energy that Liuget does. So, I mean, as of right now, he's probably gonna lose his matchup with Pouncey, but I just think that he's still. I mean, this still should be an opportunity for him to make plays. As far as the tackles, James shouldn't have any issues. I don't think the second round pick Jeremiah Tachu. He hasn't played in a while. I'm not sure if he's going to play this week. I don't see why he wouldn't, but as of today, he didn't practice. So that would leave Jared Johnson or just basically other career backups as pass rushers. So James should be fine. Brandon Albert, as Charger fans should know, with his time as a Chiefs, is a really, really good player. And so him against Freeney, and Freeney's a really good player. He's had a really good season. Lately, his numbers have fallen off because he just hasn't been as fresh as he once was early in the season. And that can be you can credit that to age, but mostly you can credit that to he's just playing way too many snaps, man. There shouldn't, like, the whole point of Freeney this year was for him and Jared Johnson to, one is the run stopper, one is the pass rush specialist. And with all the injuries at linebacker, Freeney's been basically forced into more of an every down player instead of playing. I really think ideally Freeney shouldn't play over 40-50% of the snaps, and that's just not what it's been. Freeney's had to play upwards he's played as high as 81% of the snaps, but I think he's on average about 60-some percent. But his usage is just way too high. So hopefully they can keep him fresh this game so he can make an impact in the second half of games where they really need him. But that'll definitely be one of the two best players on both sides of the line would be Freeney and Albert. So hopefully he can get the best of them. To the receivers wise, I saw that you were going on a little rant about Hartline. Do you think he's being phased out, or is that just what you want?
So I did a study on Hartline and charted every single route that he's ran this year. And I'm an Ohio State guy, and I think that there was a misconception that I have something against Hartline, which is definitely not the case. Some people took that as like a personal thing against him, but it really wasn't. Hartline has been open on 27% of all routes ran. And what I mean by open is I'm only saying about a yard of separation or in an advantageous position. So if it's a back shoulder, fade, whatever it may be, can he make a decent play on the ball? I'm really not trying to be too, it's basically what I grade a wide receiver off in college as well. So it's the same similar standards. Obviously, the NFL has smaller windows, but so I looked at Hartline, and what he's not reaching the apex of his route as quickly as the Dolphins need him to. He's running a little bit deeper this year to open up the intermediate passes, and he's just physically not capable of doing that right now. He had a torn PCL over the offseason, and it didn't require surgery, so I'm assuming it wasn't anything too serious. I don't know if that's affected him, but he's not the player that he needs Miami to be. A, because he's not getting open, and B, when he is getting open, he's dropping the ball. He had 3 drops alone last week, really crippling those drives. They all came on separate drives. Each would have been a first down. And Miami's in a tough position. They scaled back his snaps last week down from, he was playing around 90% of offensive snaps, and he went down to 46 out of 61 routes. And we saw Brandon Gibson and Rashard Matthews pick up those extra routes or extra snaps, and that's not a significant number, but that's the first time we've seen Hartline see any type of reduction in his snaps as a Dolphin. So I think that there's concern because he's not a good run blocker, and if he's not getting open and making catches, ultimately something has to give with him. Tannehill needs a guy that can go out and, kind of like Malcolm Floyd is, be that presence downfield or in one-on-one situations that can win at the highest point. And Hartline's not that guy. So Miami's a little bit in a tough position because Gibson and Matthews they're not clear-cut better than Hartline, especially when Hartline has played better. If his hands are okay, he deserves to play. The problem is he's not getting open and not catching the ball. So they're in a conundrum right now for the rest of the season.
Man, 27%. That is amazing. Last year I did the same thing with Keenan Allen, and Keenan I think he was 79 or 80%.
Wow.
Like, that's why I talk about him so much. His ability at the top of his route is just ridiculous. So that's where
I don't blame
separation creates. But
I don't blame you. I love Keenan Allen.
27%. I could see why, it'd be so frustrating to see him on the field so much. So the matchup wise would be, last year Sharice Wright really struggled with speed receivers. We saw that last week with Demaryius Thomas. We saw it last year with Deshaun Jackson, and we actually saw it with Mike Wallace. Last year, against Mike Wallace, it looked like he had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yikes. 10. He had 10 blown coverages against Mike Wallace. 4 of those were on deep routes. A couple of them were double moves where he just bit on the out or the curl, and once that happens, obviously you have no chance to run with Wallace. And then a couple of those after that, he just he wouldn't bite. There was just way too much separation, and then Wallace was able to catch the ball underneath. So I would not. This is where you really need a guy like Verrett, somebody who can just who's not as fast as Wallace, because not many people in the league are, but just someone who has the type of speed to keep up with him. So I'm really not sure what they will do with Wallace. I wouldn't imagine there would be much man coverage on him or man coverage concepts where a corner is on an island, because Flowers isn't the type of guy that can run with Wallace, but he should be fine underneath. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up. I wouldn't really worry about Hartline too much. I would imagine that if he's lined up over Brandon Flowers, that you would just leave him on an island and shift all the help to Mike Wallace. So that wouldn't be too bad of an idea, but you really worry about double moves against Mike Wallace. Has there been many double moves this year in this offense?
They're not going deep as often, and part of the issue is the receiver play after the ball is thrown. Tannehill's raw numbers are awful on deep balls, but he's also had 4 touchdowns dropped. He's had Mike Wallace does not play the ball well in the air. He dropped a touchdown against the Patriots in the end zone. Well, he caught it, but he was out of bounds. He couldn't get his second foot down, even though it was a good pass. Deion Sims has dropped the deep one against the Patriots. It was Brian Hartline dropped the deep one against Buffalo. And there's one I'm forgetting too. But so the raw numbers are uglier than really what's happened. But what I've seen a lot of is what you talked about, is that when there is single coverage outside, there's a deep safety, and that deep safety is basically just he's checking to see what Charles Clay does in the slot, and then he's going over to Wallace. Wallace has really lived off of comebacks this year, curls and comebacks, because his feet are so quick. he's literally just dominating every cornerback, almost every route that he runs that's a comeback. And as part of that's the respect that you have to have for his speed. But they're not really emphasizing the deep ball as much. It's not that they're not calling it. It's just that they're trying to clear out the intermediate routes, which is where Tannehill thrives. So they're trying to just play to his strengths a little bit more often.
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect route for a guy like Wallace, where he can just, sell that 9 like he's running him off. He's quick enough to get out of his breaks and come back to the ball. So I feel like as long as Tannehill is able to hit that, they should be fine. You talked about Charles Clay a little bit. Chargers have struggled inside the numbers, it seems like. Without looking at numbers, I just know that the linebackers haven't really been covering as well as we would expect them to. Specifically, Donald Butler. I think he's been targeted 12 times and has given up 10 completions, and each one of those completions have been like blown coverages. Manti Te'o's not in the game, so this is causing, special teamers, like full-time special team players, to have to step in for him, and that's just, it hasn't gone. I mean, it's gone as you'd expect. And then Gilchrist has been guarding slot receivers, like I said, and then sometimes tight ends. So if they were healthy, I wouldn't mind Gilchrist on him, but I mean, they're not, so they're going to have to play some sort of linebacker or zone coverage, and I don't know how that's going to go. What is Charles Clay? Is he the only threat inside the numbers?
I would put Landry above Clay at this point. Clay has had a weird season. He was so good last year. Last 2 weeks of the season, I think Rex Ryan kind of figured out how to minimize how he's going to damage the defense a little bit, because since then he really hasn't done much. He also had a knee injury over summer, and I think he's finally back from that 100%. The last 2 weeks he's played a little bit better, getting open more, much cleaner in and out of his cuts. So he's been interesting to watch, but to be honest, I don't know if he's really the threat that he once was thought to be. He's a guy that if you could put Gilchrist on him, and there's no physical reason why Gilchrist would not be able to cover him at this point from what we've seen from Clay. He's still a dangerous player. He's gonna get you on like the deep crosses. He's all right underneath on quick curls and quick outs and such. Miami will target him a little bit there, but they've kind of stopped featuring him in the offense, and I don't know if that's injury or if it's just because defenses are playing him better. It's something's been going on there to why he hasn't been a feature player. But I think Landry is really the guy that you're going to have to watch, because he's the number one read on a lot of play actions.
So moving on to the running game real quick here, Lamar Miller, he seems like he's having a really good season. I think we talk on game days every now and then about how he's doing. I see he's averaging 5 yards a carry, and San Diego's defense, run defense especially, just hasn't been what it needs to be this year. Looking at Football Outsiders, it looks like they are 22nd in DVOA in their run defense, and it's a product of the defensive lines. Really, I don't feel like they're doing that bad, but linebackers just aren't filling the holes. They're not making plays, and they're basically, with a guy like Lamar Miller, he's going to have a chance to bust a couple big ones if he just does what he's supposed to do. So how do you feel like Lamar Miller in the run game has been this year?
When they run him as much as they should, which is around 20 carries or so, like you said, he's averaging a great amount. He's a much better fit for the zone blocking scheme than I think anyone had anticipated. His vision has always kind of been an issue, but he's really excelling with the cutbacks. When he gets to the second level, he doesn't do a great job of finding the blocker. and seeing where he can escape to get that big run. If it's going to happen, I think it'll be this week because the way the Chargers are so banged up and just the quality of their linebacker play right now. I think if he's going to break a big one, it would be this week. But I think there's been issues to why Miller hasn't really been breaking them. He's very consistent. He's a guy that really should be getting more carries. Miami's the third highest yards per carry team in the league, and yet if you look at that same list, they're around the middle of the pack with carries. So they're not really committed to the run with him like they were with Noshawn Moreno before he was hurt. So I don't know if they're just trying to not wear him down or they're just limiting him to opportunities to make a mistake or what it is. But Miami could be a great running team. They don't really allow themselves to be.
Yeah, I would imagine that the Chargers defense would be a lot worse had Eric Weddle not made, big play after big play saving tackles. So that'll be something to see, Weddle's usage with speedster like Wallace on the outside, but a threat like Miller carrying the ball. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Let's get into when the Chargers have the ball. Phillip Rivers, as you know, I'm sure anytime you turn on the television or open any sort of NFL something, he's having a hell of a year. He's completing what I think is something like 70% of his passes. I think he's completed over 70% of his passes in 5 of the 8 games, and it's not like he's just dinking and dunking. He's taking shots down the field, and they're doing a pretty good job of completing those. They got Malcolm Floyd on the outside, they got Gates to work the middle, Keenan and Eddie Royal to work this underneath stuff. So they should. I don't know how it's going to be this week. I guess I haven't watched. I really want to watch the secondary. Usually I'll do that tonight. I mean, I know about Grimes on the outside. I know that they have a new linebacker in the middle there that I'm sure we'll get to here pretty quick. But how much Chargers offense have you watched this year?
So I actually did my breakdown earlier today for Bleacher Report for the game plan of how Miami's going to attack, or at least defend the Chargers offense. And it's really going to be interesting because the Dolphins, I think, overachieved, and they were at a major disadvantage when they played Green Bay and Chicago because those are such vertical teams. And the Chargers, although they'll definitely take their shots, because their playmakers are just excellent at the catch point, and Rivers, he's just so good this year. It's really not even close to me. I think he's by far and away the best quarterback in the league right now. I just think that it's going to be interesting to see because the Dolphins, they're willing to give up 5 yards. They're willing to give up that underneath stuff that the Chargers often run to Keenan Allen. They're fine with that. They want you to make a mistake once you start getting into, their own part of the field, and they start to tighten up a little bit. So stylistically, it's really a different game, and we haven't seen Miami play a team like this except for Oakland, and obviously Oakland is not comparable, but from like a scheme standpoint, they're somewhat comparable with how they attack the defense. Finnegan, how Cortland Finnegan plays against, I'm assuming Malcolm Floyd, is going to be huge. Finnegan was bullied around by Devontae Adams, and yet the next week he was great against Alshon Jeffrey and at times Brandon Marshall.
That what you just said right there is why the NFL is so stupid. That makes no sense, but that's literally what happens. Like every week, there's something where you can pinpoint, like, oh yeah, that's gonna happen, and it just doesn't happen, or no way that happens, and that's exactly what happens. Sure enough, Cortland Finnegan shuts down Alshon Jeffrey. He struggles against a rookie 3rd round wide receiver, 2nd round, whatever he was, but. Yeah, no. Something that actually I've been a little disappointed in is the Chargers receivers after they have the ball in their hands. I don't know what the numbers say, but it doesn't seem like they're consistently making guys miss or, really adding up those yards after the catch this year. And this can be, corners sitting on routes with safety help over the top or rolling coverage their way, but they were really good after the catch last year, so hopefully that'll crank up in the second half of the season here. But stylistically, like you said, it will be interesting to see if the Dolphins kind of wait back, hold off on the pressure with just blitzing four, and just keep everything in front of them, or if they really attack and sell out and play one-on-one coverage on the outside. Mostly teams have sat back with the occasional blitz, rolled coverage Keenan's way, leave Floyd one-on-one on the outside, and sort of, kind of not really, I wouldn't call it like, box, how would I say this, double team Gates in the middle, but just, have sort of a robber in there to take away any of the short throws. So it's always interesting to see how different teams view the offense, or how they try to take away one thing, whether it's Allen, whether it's Gates, whether it's, short passes or outside runs, inside runs. So that'll definitely be something to keep an eye on here. Would you say the Dolphins blitz a lot?
No, they really don't. They're really reliant on that front four, which is excellent. I would put that front four probably in the top 5 in the league, and it really lets them drop their linebackers back. And now that they're finally healthy at linebacker, they finally have Koamisi back, and they finally have Deion Jordan back from suspension. Rashad Jones, since coming back from injury, that's been a huge addition as well. I think that we'll probably, and what I would do, and what Miami usually does, is they're going to rely on that front four, and then they'll maybe bring a delayed blitzer. Jones is sometimes that blitzer from the safety position. I don't know if they'll choose to do that with Antonio Gates, but they're gonna probably be relying heavily on that front four, just because they're deep. They are literally 7 deep at defensive line, and each one of those guys is pretty highly effective as a pass rusher, especially Cam Wake, obviously.
Yeah, for DJ Fluker, life really isn't fair. The last 3 weeks the last 2 weeks he went against Justin Houston, Von Miller, and this week he gets Cameron Wake.
Man.
So I guess if I was ranking them, I would rank Von Miller as the best edge rusher in the game. I would rank Cameron Wake right behind him, and then third I would rank Justin Houston. And that's not just because these guys played each other successfully, but I seriously think like those are the 3 best edge rushers in the NFL. And Fluker gets these guys back to back to back. That's just amazing, man. But the line's going to have to play a lot better than they have been, specifically the interior line. I touched on Watt, so hopefully he's in there more. But the center, Rich Ornberger, hasn't been very good. He's a backup. Chad Reinhardt basically overachieved last year, played really well. This year, I guess we're sort of seeing who he really is as a player, and he's struggled with almost every assignment that he's had. And I imagine Audric or whoever he'll be lined up against will, give him fits, because Reinhardt hasn't been able to get much movement in the run game, and he's been embarrassed by just more athletic linemen. The good news is King Dunlap's been pretty solid at left tackle. How much longer he's going to play there, I don't know, but he's been fine, and I guess it's really all you can ask for. Like I said, Fluker, he's been fine considering who he's played, but they're going to have to give him some help this week for sure, because you can watch about 15 to 20 plays of Cameron Wake and realize that this guy's the real deal.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. How they handle Olivier Vernon's going to be interesting, and Audric inside too. It's really an impressive cast of talent that Miami's gathered there.
So the new linebacker that I was talking about was Delaney Jenkins. I watched him a little bit because I feel like anybody who watches the draft watches Florida and knows that they have all these ridiculous athletes on the defensive side of the football. And I'm pretty sure he stuck out more than who was the guy?
Bostic?
Bostic, that's who it was. I'm pretty sure he stuck out more than Bostic. And I mean, not like he's like a first round kind of guy, but you can just tell that he's an athlete that makes plays, and it seems like he's been that's exactly what he's been doing for the Dolphins. So like, what exactly is he, this athlete who just runs and makes plays? Is he just locking down pass coverage? Like, what is he doing for Miami?
So he's been really interesting. He was forced on the field because Donnell Ellerbe was lost for the season. And coming out of Florida, he was a really good athlete, great in coverage, at least very fluid, very capable of being good there. Um, Instincts were a major concern, and he played once as a rookie last year. It was against New England, and really showed a good ability to be covering in space. So fast forward to this year, it's really weird that he didn't play more because Philip Wheeler is awful in coverage. So why on earth is this guy, not playing when we are getting killed every week by tight ends and slot receivers? Um, so they get him out there with injuries, and he's playing weak side linebacker, so he's coming off of the weak side on most plays, and he's just cleaning everything up. And his ability to get to the line of scrimmage quickly, recognize plays, be in the right spot, it's just very impressive. It's very impressive for someone that didn't really get a lot of snaps last year. He looks like he's been around and playing, consistently for a few years. He's starting to turn into a playmaker now. And what I mean by that is he forced a fumble last week, making plays in coverage. He's not a lockdown cover guy, but if you put him one-on-one with Brandon Oliver, he's probably going to do pretty well. He's going to hold his own. He'll at least limit the yards after the catch. He's not the type of guy that really blows coverages downfield. So he's been a huge boost to that linebacker core because they were awful last year.
Yeah, last week Denver had a lot of success doing that. They were playing man coverage, and they basically just threw their will linebacker, which Jenkins plays the weak side linebacker, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they just put their weak side linebacker Brandon Marshall on Oliver, and what happened was Rivers would just dump it down to Oliver, dump, 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 and Marshall would just make the play. So I think he had 6 or 7 opportunities, and he missed one tackle out of all those times, but the rest were just like, really short gains. So, if you're gonna be able to stop Oliver in the backfield like that, Jenkins has the ability to do so, then it'll just force the Chargers offense into long passing downs, and that's where they struggle. The offense is built for 3rd and 6, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, so they can, throw those underneath routes, throw those slants, those timing routes, those curls, and, not have to go down the field. So, it'll be a big matchup for sure. It looks like Ryan Matthews is going to sit out this week and probably come back after the bye. So it's on Brandon Oliver and the run game again. Like I said, the offensive line has to block better. This isn't exactly the front you want to go against when your run game is struggling like they are. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they're 32nd still. I know they were 32nd last year. Let me look it up real quick. Last week they were 32nd in DVOA in the run game. This week, let me see, where is it at? Oh, they're up to 27th. So making a lot of progress in that run game. But it's like I said today or Wednesday, Oliver's fine. You can't really get mad at him for not running at a level that Ryan Matthews is. He's made, I think, he has 105 touches, I believe, and he's forced or broken 21 missed tackles. So, he's really good in that regard, but there's just occasions where he tends to bounce it to the outside where he just can cut it up and get the yards that he has to, or there's a couple other times where he has just missed a hole here. So I won't say it's becoming a habit, but we're just starting to see it more and more, and I don't know if it's just inexperience or he feels like the blocking isn't there, so he has to bounce it. But against these guys, is going to have to be disciplined because, they're good up front and they they get into the offensive line and they take away the rushing lanes here. I guess I haven't looked at what Miami is on defense. Um, let's check it out. Oh, so Miami has the third overall defense per DVOA, and they're fifth against the pass and they're ninth against the run. Does that surprise you at all? Or would you think they would be that high or that low, whatever?
Entering the season, I'd say that I'd be surprised, but on the field, it doesn't surprise me. But I will say, guys like Oliver have historically given Miami a lot of trouble. Denard Robinson last week did pretty well, more like that scat back,
Yeah.
quicker than fast. Those guys usually hurt Miami just because they have limited athletes at linebacker, especially in the middle, Koomisi. So, but Jenkins has helped a little bit in that regard. It just depends on where they use Deion Jordan. Like if they put Deion Jordan at strong side linebacker, that's a defense that just got a whole lot more athletic. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, if Oliver does play well, it won't surprise me. It really won't.
Deion Jordan, that's an interesting name. What were you happy with the pick when he was selected?
I loved it. I do, man. I was a really big Deion Jordan fan, mainly because that length, that athleticism, just there's so much potential there. And over the offseason, he got involved with some stuff that he shouldn't have, some PEDs, and then suspected drug use, and so it caused him to get suspended twice. But the payoff for him is that he added about 25 pounds of muscle. And in the preseason, he was bullying Tyron Smith for the Cowboys on bull rushes. And last game against Jacksonville, he's doing the same. He's a guy that probably works best in space because he's 6'6", 6'7", very fluid player, can cover. And now he's really strong. So he's a guy that can kind of do it all. He doesn't really have a lot of pass rushing moves. He's still very raw in that regard. He's a good defensive end, but he could be a great linebacker. And I think that's where Miami is kind of missing the boat, is that they're not really using all of his skills optimally. We saw him cover Antonio Gates fairly well last year, really probably as good as you can really ask. So that's really something that they should probably do this year again. But they seem very reluctant to put him in space like that, which is it's odd. He covered Gronk and he covered Gates pretty well last year, so I don't really know why they're so reluctant to keep him with his hand in the dirt.
Yeah, so is he more of a nickel guy? Is that what's going to happen here?
They really keep a rotation going with their pass rushers. Chargers fans are going to see a lot of Derek Shelby. He's going to usually come in for Olivier Vernon, and he'll come in on nickel situations as a defensive tackle. And then you'll see Jordan just come in for a couple series here and there as Cam Wake's. He'll be his replacement at usually strong side end. And, I mean, they do a really good job. I mean, to be honest, I think those are two starting caliber defensive ends, and that's really what makes Miami so dangerous.
Yeah, depth is something you definitely want to have on the defensive line. So I guess we talked a little bit about the secondary, but not a lot. I know we all know that Grimes is really, really good. I mean, you can argue that Grimes is probably one of the top 5 or 6 corners in the league. Just how have the rest of the secondary played this year?
Grimes, and Grimes has kind of slid a little bit, I think. He still has those great feet, but I don't know if they're consistently as great as they were last year. He is 31, and I think that he's still a bona fide number 1 corner, especially in this scheme, but I don't think he's been quite as good this year as he was last year, especially coming back to the ball. That being said, I think he'll be fine. Cortland Finnegan, for the most part, has been pretty good. You're always going to have issues when you have 2 small corners like that tackling. You'll see teams doing misdirections and reverses to get their ball carriers out to the edge and to try to take advantage of easy blocks, basically. And that's nothing against Finnegan or Grimes, but I mean, when you're 5'9", 175 pounds, there's not a whole lot that you can do against Malcolm Floyd, against Alshon Jeffrey and such. So overall in coverage, outside of the matchup with Adams, I think that Finnegan has been really surprising. He's been, I'd say, a slightly above average starter. Miami works to keep the offense from hitting deep balls, and he's done pretty well with that. He's only been burned probably a handful of times throughout the season, maybe 4 off the top of my head that I can think of. And then they're starting to incorporate Jamar Taylor more, who is a second-year corner from Boise State, missed most of last season with some injury issues. And when they put him in the game, he's been a boundary corner, which is great because Finnegan is only on a 2-year deal. Obviously up there in age a little bit. They've got to kind of plan for the future. And then when he comes in, Finnegan will go into the slot where I think he's best served. And then Taylor's looked pretty good. Taylor has drawn some penalties, and I think he's been the victim of some poor calls. Teams definitely attack him when he comes in, but he's been solid. I mean, he's been right there with receivers. He hasn't given up any big plays. He's more of the future, I think, for what Miami needs. A little bit bigger, a little bit longer, a little bit faster, but still not really an elite tools guy. He's going to have to win with more technique than tools. He's not really a blazing fast kid. So the corners have been good. They haven't been great, but part of that is also Miami's scheme. Miami's, like I said before, Miami's willing to give you 8 yards on a slant. They're fine with that. They really do not care if you do that. And that kind of limits what the cornerback can do, but it also helps cover up their weaknesses a little bit too.
Yeah, Taylor's actually a guy that I really liked coming out. I had him 4th overall. I had him over D. Milliner, actually, and I know...
Yeah, I did too, actually. That's funny that you mentioned that.
People always, like you said, they fall in love with this athletic stuff, but, guys that are just sound and don't make mistakes. So I think if he keeps developing, he'll be fine. So I'm gonna try to get a good look at Taylor because I haven't seen him play this year. So that's something I want to keep an eye on. Matchup-wise, I think, they'll be fine. One thing about Grimes is, well, first of all, you don't understand. It doesn't seem like that he's that old. It really doesn't. It doesn't seem like he's been playing for that long, but I feel like 31, man. It seems like it's gone so fast for him. But he's really good. I like him a lot. One thing about Grimes is that he recognizes the flight of the ball in the air so early, and that's why he's able to play the ball like he is. I think he has really good ball skills, and that's something about Verrett, man. When all these guys, these NFL guys, talk about 5'9", not going to be able to do anything, but as long as you recognize the ball and you high point it, you're going to be able to outjump. If you recognize the ball quicker than the receiver does, you're going to be able to outjump him. You're going to be able to outjump him and make a play on the ball in the air. It's just common sense. It's just how it works, and that's something that Grimes does really well. So deep balls on him and Floyd, that'll be. I mean, I'm sure he'll be tested, but it's not something that I would look forward to if I was a Charger fan. I would say that I really like the matchup with Keenan and Finnegan. I know I guess I haven't really watched Finnegan in depth this year, but just what I know on Finnegan as a player and how Keenan runs his routes and seeing what Adams was able to do to him on the shorter routes, I feel like he's going to be able to have success there. For some weird reason, the Chargers refused to incorporate Ladarius Green this year. It's been all Gase, and Gase has been fantastic, but I feel like Green is a better matchup nightmare than what they use Royal for in their 3 receiver sets. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, Green had a big game last year against these guys. He actually caught a ball over Grimes, for whatever that's worth. So it'll be fun. Rivers has been balling out. So I think it's time to get into a prediction before we get out of here, man. Tell me, what do you think the score is going to be on Sunday? Right now, it is Chargers are 1-point underdogs.
Wow, so the line actually moved a couple points on that already.
What was it before that?
I think it was Dolphins favored by 3.
Oh
So
wow.
it's coming. Yeah, it's one of those things where I think Miami matches up pretty well with San Diego with the injuries. Um, it helps that Miami's at home like last year. They've got the time zone difference. If I were to pick a winner, I'd probably say Miami 28, Chargers 27. Um, that being said, Miami is such an erratic team. They're just so inconsistent sometimes. Like they come out so flat. And I would not be surprised if the Chargers won 34-13. But
Jesus.
yeah, I know, man. It's just one of those things where I'm not confident in the coaching staff for Miami because defensively they don't change, and offensively they're still very inconsistent with a first-year guy. And Philbin, I just don't think Philbin's a good coach. So that being said, I do think Miami matches up well. I'm gonna think positively for the Dolphins' sake, and not try to jinx the team, but I'm gonna say 28-27 Dolphins.
So riding that Vegas wave. Looks like the over under is 45 right now. So you're taking the over too. I will say, hmm. I think that I think that the Chargers are going to win. I think that the Chargers are going to be able to control the ball better than they have. I think that they're going to be able to get Miami off the field as well. One thing that I read last week that the Dolphins didn't have a first down until like late in the second quarter. And just like you said, that they've been sort of sputtering out of the gate on in most of their games, just getting off these slow starts. And I think that the Chargers are a team that can actually make them pay if that continues. So I guess I'm kind of saying that does continue. I say the Chargers win 23-20, and um, I think that Gates has another big game. I'm not sure if Jenkins is going to be the guy that guards him the whole game, but I think they'll be able to match up Gates against the a safety, and that'll be the difference in the game. So I'll go 23-20 Chargers. Yeah, man, I really don't think there's much else to touch on. I'm sure I'll talk to you before then, before Sunday, and I'm gonna try to break down some of the Dolphin stuff here, see what see what they're doing on offense, see how creative they are, like you say, or how lack thereof, how their vanilla their defense is. So it'll be fun to watch, man, because the Dolphins do have some good players that I really want to keep an eye on. So yeah, man, just good luck the rest of the season. Obviously not this game, and yeah, no, thanks for taking the time to do this, man.
Oh, of course, man. Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun to watch the Chargers, and I'm really interested to see how this game plays out for both teams.
All right, and yeah, thanks guys for listening. So we will see you next week.